happened when she stopped by the mine booth. Shots were absolutely shit. Flash wasn't behaving with the camera. The Mazak shots are fine. They're good. Got a few good ones there. So that's nice when you've got the size of the building, logo. So that one was well.
Yeah, sorry, so I'm only behind you. Do you want to do a piece to camera? An RCITV? No, yeah, I know. Do you want to do a piece to camera? With her in the background. Alright. Well, I'm wondering whether you should be sitting back there. She's going to be mic'd, and whether you should stand around the back with me. If you look behind me, I don't know, screw it. I'm just behind you, literally behind you. Here. Why don't you come out? Because then we can do a piece of camera with the ITV camera, potentially. Come out. So you get stuck. I don't know. She's going to be on mic. You'll hear her back here. ask a question? Yeah. And ITV will leave as well.
Sorry? That's the clock, yeah. Can't hear you, sir. Yes. Counter, it's called counter IUD. It's the correct. And it's all shortened as C-IUD. gives me great pleasure to introduce the Prime Minister, Theresa May.
Thanks very much, everybody, and it's great to be here today and to have had an opportunity to walk around, to talk to a few of you, to see the fantastic work and the really skilled work that you're doing here and the variety of work that you're doing here. One of the things I've done today is brought my cabinet up here to the northeast, and one of the things we've been talking about is how can we make the most of some of the skills and the expertise that we have in certain parts of the country, like this part of the country, in manufacturing, and make the best of that for the future and providing prosperity and jobs for the future. Of course, one of the issues that affects that question of jobs for the future is Brexit. And a couple of weeks ago, I and my cabinet agreed a proposal that we're putting to the European Union for the future relationship we should have with the European Union. Just very briefly, that delivers on the referendum vote. It means that there will be an end to free movement, an end to sending vast sums of money to the EU every year, an end to the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice in the UK. But we're proposing that we do it in a way that ensures that we can keep frictionless trade across borders so that parts and products can move seamlessly across our borders with countries in the European Union, which is important to companies that are exporting and importing parts. And that enables us to protect jobs and livelihoods, but at the same time, make sure that we can do good trade deals around the rest of the world too. And I've been hearing today about some of the other parts of the world that this group of companies exports to, and I think that's important for that as well. So delivering on the referendum, but doing so in a way that protects jobs and livelihoods is our aim. That's the plan that we've put forward, and obviously we're now going to be talking to the European Union about it. But I'm pleased to be able to be here, and really I wanted an opportunity for you to ask me any questions that you might want to ask. So I will stop doing my opening remarks and open it to questions from around me, literally around me. Who would like to be the first to ask a question? Oh, over there, right.
Prime Minister, thank you very much. You set out your objectives and the plan that you've worked out with your ministers and put to the European Union. What confidence that you have, because it seems like having our cake and eating it too, what confidence do you have that you'll sell this plan to the rest of Europe?
Well, first of all, I've always said that I think a future partnership between the UK and the EU that's good for the UK will be good for the EU as well. And I think what we're proposing in terms of a free trade area where products can move seamlessly across borders is good for countries in the EU as well as being good for us here in the UK. And what I see around the European Union as we're coming close to the point, we'll leave on the 29th of March 2019, and we've got to negotiate this deal in advance of that. What I see is people focusing their minds now on the impact that the future relationship will have on their economies as well as ours. And so we've had some constructive responses so far. I won't say that you won't hear some negative things being said, but so far constructive responses. So we're going to sit down and talk to people about it. Anybody else? Come on, the Northeast isn't normally as shy as this.
Hi, Prime Minister. In the event that Parliament rejects the deal that's negotiated with the European Union, is it inevitable that there'll be a no-deal Brexit, or will you have time to table and take a new deal out to negotiate?
Well, my aim is to bring forward a deal that Parliament will support, because it'll be a good deal for the United Kingdom. Now, obviously, we're going into a negotiation. We're making sure that we're prepared for no deal. And government is stepping up its preparations for no deal because it only makes sense to be prepared for all contingencies. But I'm working to get a deal that Parliament will support because they'll see that it's a good deal for the UK.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister. Just a quick question. With the divorce bill being so high, will we still reap the benefits of the projects that money's been set aside for?
Yes, I mean, you say the divorce bill as about the size of the divorce bill. Actually, it's a lot lower than the European Union were first talking about. I mean, at the start, they were talking, well, I think they started at 60, 70, maybe 100 billion, and it's euros, and it's around 39 billion euros. But crucially, what we will have in the future is the ability to use the money that otherwise we spent every year sending to the EU on our own priorities. And one of the priorities we will use that money on is the NHS. So we've set aside, we're going to develop a long-term plan for the NHS, and by 2023-24, in real terms, there'll be £394 million extra a week going into our National Health Service. And part of that is money that otherwise we would have been spending to the EU.
Hi, Prime Minister. We've got some excellent universities here in the North East, and we already work very closely with them. Are there any new initiatives following Brexit that'll help us to continue to use that world-class research that's coming out of those institutions to develop world-class products?
Well, yes. I mean, if I can answer your question in a number of ways. I mean, one of the things that we will be looking to do as part of our modern industrial strategy, that's partly what we've been talking about today, is recognising the huge benefits that can come from industry working with our world-class universities. That means working with them in a number of areas. So there's a real expertise developing in universities here on issues around ageing. That's one of the challenges that we've set in our industrial strategy. How can we use technology? How can we better prepare people? How can we ensure that people live healthier lives for longer? But there's an expertise here that we can draw on. So part of our industrial strategy is about recognising our particular expertise in universities and helping to use that to develop clusters of growth around those universities, providing high-skilled jobs, well-paid jobs, and obviously being good for the economy more generally.
Prime Minister, you said that hopefully after Brexit we'll be able to do some trade deals around the world. Have we been able to start those discussions, or are our hands tied until we actually finish with the Brexit next March? Or can we start those talks now?
Well, we've started some early discussions, you may have read that this was one of the subjects I talked with President Trump about when he was in the UK just over a week ago. We can't actually sign any deals until we've left the EU after next March, but we will be able to negotiate and then sign those deals, and they'll come into effect at the end of December 2020 after the implementation period is in place. One of the first things we're doing is looking to make sure we have a smooth exit so that agreements that the EU currently has with countries around the world, we're able to translate into a UK agreement at the point at which we leave, and then we can improve. So we've talked to the Americans, we're talking to a variety of people. The Australians are very interested in a trade deal with us, Canadians and others as well. The Australian Prime Minister said the other day he would welcome us being part of what's called the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is a larger number of countries, Australia, New Zealand, and Singapore and others. So there's a lot of interest out there in us being able to do those trade deals with them. At the back, there.
Good afternoon. Earlier in the year, the BBC published an article which said that the North East would be the worst affected region after Brexit, with economic growth potentially slowing by up to 16%. My question is, what plans do you have, long-term plans, other than the grants that you've outlined in your recent press release, which would boost the North East economy post-Brexit?
Well, one of the first things that it's important for us to do for the North East economy is actually making sure that we can see this free trade area that we're talking about. There are companies here, and particularly obviously the automotive sector up here in the North East relies heavily on the integrated supply chains with other countries within the European Union. That frictionless border is very important to that, and obviously that's a focus of the free trade area we're talking about developing with the European Union. But alongside that, the work we're doing in the industrial strategy, the work to develop infrastructure is important. £780 million we're announcing today to go into improving the East Coast main line. We're announcing 600 million over a number of years going into the north of the Tyne devolution deal, with North Tyneside, Northumberland and Newcastle councils being involved in that. Again, looking to see what are the areas of expertise here, of skills that we can develop for the economy of the future. And it's important, I mean, one of the things that we're looking at is how we can ensure that as the sort of jobs of the future change, actually we're able to ensure that people have the skills to take on those new jobs. So developing the skills, making sure the infrastructure is there, and then encouraging that investment by companies here in the UK, and encouraging investment to come in from overseas into the UK as well, is all part of helping the economy for the future.
Prime Minister, we talk about developing skills, but recently where I live we've had numerous new housing developments, but no school developments. So is there anything in the education budget to guarantee that our children will get education in the UK? Well, there's obviously we need to make sure we're providing the school places for the number of children who need those school places. There's a number of things happening. I mean, one of the things that I think is good in the northeast is we now see, I think it's about 44,000 more children in good or outstanding schools. I think in Newcastle 4 out of 5 schools are good or outstanding. But obviously providing the right number of school places is important. Partly that's about local authorities and the decisions that they take. It's also we have a programme of what's known as the free schools, which enables others to set up schools in areas where they're needed. But the Department of Education will always be talking to local authorities about how many school places are needed in a particular local area. And I know it's not just here. When people see new development taking place, it's one of the things people are concerned about is making sure that the school places are there. We want to make, at the moment, overall across the country, there's actually a surplus of school places, but it's making sure you've got the places where the children actually need them, where the housing development is taking place, where those places are needed.
Prime Minister, you probably have the world's most stressful job at the moment. How do you cope and how do you unwind?
Well, there's several things I like to do. I like walking, so my husband and I enjoy going walking when we can, taking holidays, walking. I enjoy cooking, which has a benefit because you get to eat it as well as make it. I have over 150 cookbooks, so I spend quite a lot of time looking at cookbooks. I do enjoy, if I get the time, watching. I don't know anybody, does anybody here know the American series NCIS? I quite like watching NCIS when I can. One at the back there.
Prime Minister, how do you think we will fare post-Brexit in European competitive tendering?
Well, I think, can I give a general answer and then come to the European point? First of all, in general, I think the UK is going to do really well post-Brexit. I think there are huge opportunities for us. We're a great entrepreneurial, innovative, creative country. I think we've got huge skills here. Our universities are fantastic. You know, just look at the number of UK universities in the top tiers of universities across the world. I think we've got real opportunities post-Brexit, and we can be much more outward-looking post-Brexit, hence the trade deals around the rest of the world, for example. So I think there are real opportunities out there for us. And there's a bit of interplay with the European Union at the moment on one particular area in the space, the Galileo project, about whether they'll let us into that project. But we're still working with them on that. I would hope, and I think, that what we will see, actually, is a recognition from those who are looking to procure of the benefits of procurement here. It's very interesting. One of the products I looked at that was actually being developed for the French specifically for the French. I think there's a huge expertise and skill set here in the UK, which I think it's to others' benefits to be able to continue to procure from us in some of those areas in the future. But we want to make sure that we have that good economic relationship with the EU. So it's not a question of replacing what we've had with the EU with trade around the rest of the world. It's keeping good trade with the EU and building on it with trade around the rest of the world. Yes, there's a question.
Hello, good afternoon. We've talked a lot about freedom of trade and goods and services travelling across borders. But one thing you've said quite clearly is that people won't anymore after March. Presumably the EU could take the same stance and say UK nationals cannot travel to Europe so freely. I just wondered if you thought that was a good position to be in or not.
Well, can I separate out? The thing that we're very clear about is that free movement will end. So at the moment, we're able to set immigration rules for the rest of the world, but not for the European Union. Once we have left the European Union, we can set immigration rules for the people coming from the EU as well as people coming from the rest of the world. But then there's a separate issue, which is, people wanting to travel as tourists, perhaps go on holiday to Spain, or whatever, people coming from the EU here to holiday here. We want that to be able to continue to be easy for people. And that's one of the sections that we'll be negotiating in the future partnership that we're looking at. But in terms of free movement, i.e. that sort of rights that people currently have across as members of the European Union, we will bring an end to free movement to the UK. We'll be able to set our own immigration rules for people from inside the European Union as well as people outside the European Union. Yes.
Prime Minister, good afternoon. The special relationship we have with the United States doesn't necessarily appear that special anymore. Would you like to comment on that, please?
Well, I think I can probably do, the best thing I can do is quote President Trump in his press conference that I had with him at Chequers, where he said it was the highest level of special in terms of the relationship. Look, the special relationship between the UK and the US has existed for many years and will continue to exist for many years. They are our longest standing and deepest defence and security partnership. In the future, we're looking to do a good trade deal with the US as well, and we're already talking to them about some of the things we can do there to enhance our trade with the United States. We're the two countries that stand as the first and second biggest defence budgets in NATO. We've stood alongside each other on shoulder to shoulder on so many occasions. That relationship is still special, and it will continue to be special in the future too.
Hi, Prime Minister. The vast majority of economic forecasts are predicting that there'll be a decline in the UK economy in the immediate aftermath of Brexit, and there's varying degrees of certainty over how long a period of time that decline will go on for. What plans are in place to protect investment in the UK, particularly investment in infrastructure, which is in a state of decline at the moment and requires significant investment to bring it back to an even keel?
Well, look, we're taking a number of decisions in terms of investment in infrastructure, which I think will be important for our economy, regardless of Brexit. But obviously, we're looking to the post-Brexit world as well. So announcements such as what we're doing on the East Coast Main Line, the devolution deals, which, as I've said, north of the Tyne one we've announced, but also the devolution deals we've done in other parts of the country as well. These are all part of a wider picture of investment. In terms of our railways, we're investing more in our railways than has been done since the Victorian age. So we see the importance of that. And of course, these days, infrastructure isn't just roads and railways, it's broadband as well. It's the digital communications too. And we're ensuring that we can move ahead on that. But I would just say that the future post-Brexit is going to be what we make it. We want to get that good deal with the European Union, but we have huge benefits here in the UK with, as I say, our entrepreneurship, our innovation, our skill set, our workforces, we can really make, take those opportunities and have that brighter future. And many people said that immediately after the referendum, we would see a collapse in our economy. And in fact, our economy has continued to grow. But as I say, our future is what we make it. Anyone? Oh.
Prime Minister, do you feel that in the current balance in Parliament gives disproportionate influence to smaller minority groups and that they might use that power to destabilise Brexit?
Well, obviously there's the parliamentary arithmetic is such, as you know, we have, as a Conservative Party, we have a confidence and supply agreement with the DUP. And as part of that confidence and supply agreement, they support us on Brexit. There are certain issues they agreed to support us on, and on others we look at it on a case-by-case basis. If you look across Parliament, there are different views on the Brexit issue across Parliament. But I think what's important to me is that Parliament asked the people to choose. Parliament said to the British public, we would like you to choose whether you want to stay in the EU or not. People chose. And it's now for Parliament to deliver on the choice on people's choice. And I think that's important in terms of people's trust in what we as politicians do. There's one over here. Should I take this one over here first and then come there? Because this side hasn't really had a question yet. So.
Good afternoon. A phrase that's going around is whether or not proposals are delivering on the Brexit that people voted for. How is it possible to interpret that from the simplistic question on the referendum ballot, and is there a need for further public input?
Well, first of all, if that was a question as to whether there should be a second referendum, actually, I think for the reasons I've just outlined in the previous question, no, we asked people to choose, they made their choice, and I think it's now for the government to deliver on it. What I think for many people voting in the referendum, bringing an end to free movement was a really important issue. Others will have, the jurisdiction of the European Court would have been an issue. The question of how much money was being spent to the European Union was an issue. I actually think there was also something else underlying the vote, which wasn't just about membership of the EU, but it was about how people felt governments were delivering for them, and some people who felt that actually others were seeing benefits, not playing by the rules, and actually government should listen to people across the whole country. And that's why when I became Prime Minister, I said I want a country that works for everyone. And so what we're doing is not just Brexit, but these other issues as well. Industrial strategy across the whole country, looking at fairer funding for schools across the whole country, some of those issues too. But this is a complex issue, and it is, you're right, the question people asked was a simple one, leave or remain. But obviously behind that, in terms of the negotiations, a whole layers of complexity in terms of the future relationship. But I think the key things that people wanted to see was an end to free movement, end to the jurisdiction of the European Court, an end to paying vast sums of money to the EU every year, and that feeling that we were able to take that control of our money, our borders and our laws, which is what we will do, and do those trade deals around the rest of the world. Sorry, there was a...
Prime Minister, you mentioned in your opening comments that you're very keen to support the manufacturing in the North East, and over the last 20, 30 years that's been reducing and reducing. In practical terms, what does that mean when you say you want to support it? How is that going to manifest itself?
Well, I think the first thing, one of the things I would say is what I've been talking about, which is, there's manufacturing industry here in the North East that depends on those integrated supply chains with the European Union. It's important to ensure that we can enable those integrated supply chains to continue to operate smoothly with a frictionless border. That's what our proposal does. Getting the infrastructure right that supports manufacturing industry is important too. But then some other things. I think actually what I was pleased to meet a number of the apprentices here. I think what we've been doing in encouraging apprenticeships is hugely important. So encouraging young people to come into manufacturing industry, to see the benefits of manufacturing industry, to learn the skills that can take that industry forward for the future. But of course also working with industry to say, where is it going to lie in the future? If you look at something like cars, moving to the driverless cars, moving to electric vehicles, all important developments for the future, helping our manufacturing industry in the UK to be at the forefront of those developments and to be world leading, which in many areas we are, is an important part. Another thing I would say, which again we've been talking about today, is helping, and important for companies like this, helping you to export. I mean, you do a lot of exports around the world, not just Europe, but actually making exporting as easy as possible for companies, encouraging more manufacturing companies to be exporting as well is important. It improves our economy. It's great for Britain, for people to see great British products around the world.
Thank you. Prime Minister, the Cabinet discussed last week the MDP policy regarding what was happening in the defence programmes for the future and when it will come to a conclusion. We're heavily linked to defence here in the North East. Can you give us some answers around that?
Well, the work on the modernising defence programme hasn't completed yet, and it's got several elements to it. The point of it is to say, actually, people focus often a lot on conventional forces, and but the threats are changing out there. We need to say, what do we need to have as a leading defence nation, as a leading military power in the world? What do we need to have for the defence of the future? And that's what the modernising defence programme is about. It's also about, it's about making sure that the Ministry of Defence, when it procures products, is spending its money as wisely and as cost effectively as it should be and could be. So there's that element too, but it's about shaping for the future and saying what is right for the future. So the work is still ongoing, but we will continue to be a leading military power. We'll continue to, but recognising that some of the threats we see, for example, if you look at Russia at the moment, what it does in terms of the cyber threat, in terms of propaganda, interference, those sorts of issues are ones that we have to look at for the future, as well as, and malign state activity comes from other countries as well. So looking at that whole aspect of where do the threats lie and what are the capabilities we need to deal with those threats is what the MDP is about. And it will, as I say, it's still ongoing. Well, I think I can take a couple more questions.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister. As a female working in a male-dominated environment, what advice would you give to other females working in such environments?
Believe in yourself, be yourself. And I would say, I mean, what I say to women in politics and business generally is don't feel you have to do a job in the way that the men do it. You've got skills. Show your skills in your job in the way that you want to show those skills. But I think it's great to see women in engineering. It's one of the areas of employment we haven't managed to get as many women into in the past as I would like to see. So it's good to see some female apprentices coming into engineering companies. So good on you. Be yourself and believe in yourself. One more final question.
Are there any plans to reduce the price of university education? Because it's quite easy here to jump on a ferry and go to Holland to study.
We've got, what we've got is a review at the moment of post-18 education, which is actually looking, not just looking at university education, it's looking at more widely as well as some of the issues around further education and, if you like, routes into education and skills for young people. And it's looking at we'll look at some challenges for the university sector as well. Why is it that virtually every course you do, I mean, obviously there's some that are longer, like medicine, but universities offer 3-year degree courses. Might there be some benefit in some offering 2-year degree courses? What's the right mix for us to have in university education? What is the right opportunities? How does that fit in with further education? How does it fit in with, how do we ensure those graduate apprenticeships are there? You know, so there's a whole range of issues being looked at the moment around post-18 education to make sure that we get it right for the future, because skilling people up, getting those skills is absolutely essential for the future. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Thank you.